Hello, friends, and welcome to the Boot Room, the show where we look ahead to the weekend game for Ipswich Town. Mark Heath, Andy Warren here to break down another big one. The hits keep on coming, Andy. They've just drawn at fourth place Sheffield Wednesday. Now they head to third place Plymouth Argyle live on Sky Sports. And of course, second place Pompey looming in the distance next weekend. Plymouth, though, how are you feeling about it?
Always fun going to Plymouth. It's a proper football club, proper ground. Good support. Ipswich always somehow managed to take really good support, given how far that is, and with it being on TV as well. Hoping it's a good advert for Ipswich and for League One in general. But it should be a really good game against between two really good teams.
Lots of talking points to get into. I guess first of all, the fact that it's on TV, 12:30 kickoff on Sky. Town traditionally do not fare well on television, Andy, which will add to kind of fans feeling a little bit nervous about this one. Is that something that you buy into, the TV curse?
No, quite frankly, curses aren't something that overly worry me, and I feel sure that Kieran McKenna couldn't care less about the previous record on TV. The last time Ipswich were on TV, I think I'm right in saying was at Rotherham.
Yeah.
The back end of last season, they've obviously lost that game, but I don't think they'll care. I think if they're worrying about being on TV, that's not a particularly good sign. But hopefully there's no curses kind of coming up and biting Ipswich in this one. It shouldn't really be a factor, I would hope.
And in terms of storylines around it, there's one big question we'll get to when we talk about the teams, but also a return for Christian Walton to his boyhood club on quite a big day for him in terms of making a landmark appearance.
Yeah, 200 league appearances for him, which for a goalkeeper of his ability is maybe taking him a little bit longer to reach that number than his ability would suggest. But he's a Cornwall boy, grew up supporting Plymouth, was a season ticket holder for many years, went home and away, idolised a bit of a Plymouth icon down there, Roman Alario, a goalkeeper I remember pretty well. I'm sure many Ipswich fans do as well from their time in the Championship. He loved him. Did homework assignments about him, but then got to know him quite well as well on his way up through the Plymouth youth system. He didn't make any appearances for Plymouth before heading off to Brighton in 2013, but he did have a very, very brief loan spell with them fairly soon after that. So he's an Argyle fan, but he'll have the Ipswich badge on his chest, and there's only one result he wants from the weekend, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And we said Plymouth are in third. They're on a really good run. They lost 5-1 to Charlton, and that kind of seemed to galvanise them because since then they've gone 5 unbeaten, won 4 of those. What kind of game are you expecting, Andy? Plymouth obviously it's a long way for a start, always a tough place to go. What type of game are you expecting?
A good game, I would say. Stephen Schumacher's kind of carried on what Ryan Lowe did as Plymouth manager, and you're right. Their results since that Charlton battering are really impressive, and it's not just the results they've got; it's the teams they've played and beaten in that time as well. The game before Charlton, they beat Peterborough 2-0, and since they've beaten Bolton, they've won at Derby, they've won at home to Oxford, and then last time out in the league, they've drawn 2-2 away at Portsmouth. So they faced some of the better teams in this league and have fared well in those games. They play decent football. They're firm with it as well. They play a similar system to Town, kind of, depending on which way you read the Ipswich system at the moment. They're in a 3-4-2-1, which is fairly similar. They've got that flexibility about them as well. So I'm expecting a good game between two teams who in many ways are quite evenly matched.
That win at Derby was a cracker as well. They came from 2-0 down to win 3-2, didn't they? I think they won with the almost final kick of the match. So clearly a side that have a lot of resilience and don't give up if they do go behind. They are going to be missing some key players though, Andy, for this one.
Yeah, the headline one there is Finn Azaz, who's an attacking midfielder that we got to know a little bit in the early weeks of last season. He played really, really well for Newport when they came to Portman Road and won in the Carabao Cup. He's a proper creative number 10 attacking midfield player, but he's away with Ireland's under 21s, so he won't be involved, and he's a big miss for Ipswich. Obviously, we'll get for Plymouth. Sorry, we'll get on to Ipswich's absentees in a moment. But of those that are missing, he's he's the headline one for Plymouth.
Yeah, they're joint top scorer, I believe, so far. 3 goals to his name. A key man for them. Let's talk about key men for Ipswich then, Andy. We can't avoid it any longer. The one big question around this game is, of course, the fact that Town will be missing Wes Burns on Welsh international duty. Didn't play, actually. Or wasn't even in the squad, was he, last night? But he will definitely not be missing. He definitely will be missing for Ipswich Town at Plymouth. So the big question is, how do you replace him, Andy, on that right side?
The good news is they've got options. This isn't scratching around, converting someone, or dragging somebody up from the reserves / youth system, which
Mm,
may have to happen at other clubs, and may well have had to happen at Ipswich in the past. There's options for Kieran McKenna. There's three, possibly even four genuine right side options to pick through here to replace Wes Burns, and the most natural one I would say would be Kane Vincent-Young, who, depending on whether Ipswich are more of a back three or a back four, would maybe dictate what they're doing. But if I had a pound placed on this one, Vincent-Young would probably be the one that I think they'll go with, simply because he's the more natural right sider, can play well in all 3/3 of the pitch, can defend and offer Donacien that support, whilst also getting forward and linking with, I would imagine, would be Connor Chaplin,
mm.
further forward. He's the most natural one, but there are other options in there as well.
And do you want to talk through the rest of those options, Andy?
Yeah. I just didn't want this to go on and on, but yes,
Yeah.
I'll talk about the other. We've seen Caden Jackson used there. The win at Burton, he played a bit of a converted wing back role, but he played that while Wes Burns was injured. Vincent-Young then played it a few days later at Shrewsbury. But at Burton, Jackson played it. It's not particularly familiar to him, and he had to work incredibly hard to operate up and down the flank defending. We didn't really see him attacking in the way that he would want, but he did it well. It seems strange to say it, but he would almost feel like the more defensive option in some ways. He's a striker, but he's maybe a container. A hard would be, you'd want him working hard rather
Mm,
than being the one that's kind of helping Ipswich dictate play, which is why I wonder whether they'll go with Vincent-Young. But
mm,
I also think Marcus Harness is a potential option there. I don't think they'll go with that because he's made himself really vital to the top end of the pitch effort.
mm,
But when he was signed, there was definitely a sense that at least a part of his arrival was with an eye on the World Cup in November, when we may be having this conversation about who replaces Wes Burns for a month rather than just one game.
mm,
But I don't think they'll go with that. But the one that intrigues me the most, and I think he'll be involved in this game, possibly from the bench, but the one that intrigues me the most is Kyle Edwards, because if you can get him playing in a game where I think both teams will look to be on the front foot, if
mm,
you can get him playing, he could be a real major plus to add into this squad. So there'll definitely be a part of me, if I was the manager, considering giving him a start, because if you're not starting him in games like this, you have to start to wonder, when will that league start come, or will it come at all? So I'd like to see him given a proper go, because it's the only way we're going to know where he fits in and what his future might be at Ipswich. He's shown, we know what he can do. We've seen
mm,
flashes of that. He just needs to prove, and he knows this himself. He just needs to prove to McKenna that he can do it and that he can be trusted to do it in the big games like this. My gut feeling is he'll have to do it from the bench, but
mm.
we shall see.
We shall see. In terms of missing Burns, Andy, if this was last season, the idea that Town were playing without Burns would have been huge, wouldn't it? Because he was so important to everything they did. Everything went down that right-hand side. Now, so far this season, that's not the case. And he's certainly not kind of hit the same heights yet that he did last season. Is it as big of a miss, would you say? Is it, given they've got these kind of players that can step in for him?
No, no, it's not. If you're thinking about the back end of last season as well, Vincent-Young hadn't been involved as much. He
Mm,
wasn't at the fore. Jackson was injured second half of last season as well. Couldn't play that position. Kyle Edwards was injured second half of last season. Couldn't play it. So if we were having this conversation under Kieran McKenna, during the second half of 21-22 season. The options just weren't there. It was Wes Burns. He was the route to goal, but the goals are coming from the men behind the strikers at the moment. And crucially, Leif Davis has brought some balance to the left side that makes the whole team that much more balanced and that much more functional as a unit. So no, he is a miss for sure, because I think he is the most natural in terms of the link with Chaplin and Dynastian. They're well used links. They're very smooth in the way they operate, but it's certainly not the big miss, the vital miss that it would have been previously, and that's a good thing. That's very much a good thing for Ipswich. Although we'd obviously love to have Burns performing right at the top end of that form that he hit last season when he was exceptional.
Are there, before we get to your team, Andy, we get that flash graphic we've got this season, are there any other big calls, do you think, for McKenna in terms of selection going into this one?
Not to that magnitude. I think there are some areas worth talking about. The central striker would be one. If obviously Caden Jackson started at Hillsborough a week ago on a left side, and John Jules through the middle. My natural thing would be to fall back on Freddie Ladapo at this point, which would mean a change to the league side. If Jackson's kind of playing out on the right, which he may do, then Ladapo would be my choice through the middle. Wouldn't be entirely surprised if Jackson went through the middle on this one, or John Jules. It's hard to guess Kieran McKenna team sometimes, but for me, I would be quite settled on a Chaplin, Ladapo, and Harness front three. That would be the way that I'd go.
Okay, shall we do the team then? You want to give us your full team, and we flash it up on the graphic as you produce it?
Yeah, Walton in goal, obviously. For me, this Ipswich team is looking more and more like a back four for long spells at the moment. But I've got a feeling it could look more of the three in this one. That's what Plymouth play, and I think maybe matching that up might be the way to go. So that would be Dynastian, Wolfenden, and Edmondson. Let's go Vincent Young as the right wing back, Davis as the left, Morsey and Evans clearly the central two, and then as I've already said, Chaplin and Harness behind Ladapo. That would be where I'm looking.
And we always have to have this conversation now with the 5 subs rule, Andy. Huge bonus for Town, an advantage for them this season. You've already mentioned Carl Edwards potentially off the bench. Are there any other kind of players you see having a big part to play off the bench in this one?
Yeah, that would be a potential one. Obviously, there's no Greg Lee, so he's away with Jamaica. So we've seen that change made in the past as well, a left sider. So that's a big one. There's no left-sided cover for Leif Davis for the final 20 minutes, half hour of a game, which we've sometimes seen. But then depending on who's started, you're going to have one of Jackson, Ladapo, and John Jules as a bench option, aren't you? Going into this game, at least one of, possibly even more than one of those going into the game. So Ipswich are going to have those. They are going to have options on the bench. Obviously, a little short. They've got plenty more. Dominic Ball can come in, and then there's obviously Ghassan Khadne as well, who we haven't even discussed here as being part of the striker shuffle. He was cup tied in the week, but he'll be in the mix as well. I'd be very surprised if he came straight in to start, but he's there as an option. So
you kind of forget he's already scored 5 goals this season for the worst team in League One, so not a bad option to have. Maybe even if we don't talk about him. Right, there's one big question left, obviously, Andy, and that's your prediction. Before we get to that, let's enjoy some key stats ahead of this game. There we go. There's your key stats for this game. Then, Andy, the big question, what do you think is going to happen live on Sky TV at Plymouth on Sunday lunchtime?
Can't really tell you why, but I felt a real confidence about of the 3 that have been coming: Sheffield Wednesday, Plymouth, and then Portsmouth next weekend. The one that I have felt confident about is Plymouth. I think it might just be because it's 2 teams with similar approaches that might go at it in a similar-ish way, and I'd back Ipswich to come out on top in a game like that. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. 2-1 Ipswich.
2-1 Ipswich. I'm saying 1-0 because that's what I predicted when I did that little run of games prediction a few weeks ago. So 2-1, 1-0. We're both saying Town are going to win and break the TV curse. Hopefully we're right. If you are going, enjoy the game. More than 1,000 Town fans going, which is absolutely incredible. It is live on Sky, of course, as well. So most of you will be watching it. Enjoy it. Follow it with us, and we'll catch you in the next Boot Room video.